Good morning and welcome to another edition of Monday Morning Coffee. I'm Pastor Brad alongside Bill Halsey, who's so graciously agreed to sit in with us again this week as Josh is getting recouped up. Josh, love you, buddy. We're praying for you. Hope you get the rest that you need, and we'll see you back when you're healthy. So, Bill, how are you this morning?
Well, doing great.
Good,
It was great to get up this morning and see it raining outside,
Absolutely.
which we needed very badly.
Yep, definitely needing some rain. Oh man, I was just about to have to announce to you guys that our Facebook hadn't pulled up, and so I wouldn't be able to answer your questions. But as soon as I started to say that, our Facebook is up. So if you have any questions, make sure that you post them on there, and we would love to hear from you. Whether it's just a good morning, or if you have a question concerning yesterday's Bible or yesterday's sermon, anything like that, we'd love to hear from you. You can post them on there. If you are watching on the app or on YouTube or wherever you might be watching from, and you're not able to interact with us through Facebook, you can text me if you have my phone number. We would be happy to hear from you in that regard as well. So glad to be here this morning. I've got my coffee cup. Bill doesn't drink coffee, but I still love him because we're Christian brothers. But we do have a question that came in yesterday in our handy dandy Monday morning coffee mug. So I appreciate whoever left this for us, and we're going to start with this one. And it says this: how to reach young families, ideas. So ideas for reaching young families. That's kind of the main topic of what we've been discussing. Posterity, our focus on younger generations, our focus on subsequent generations. If this church is going to have a future, children are our future, and we have to include those young families. And so, ideas for getting them in the church. Bill, what do you think?
Well, this is something that we're going to have to work on, of course. We're going to have programs that will influence the young people. I mean, there's a lot of situations out there, ball games and all this that seems to take them away anymore. So this is going to be a challenge to get young families in there, and our church is needing them very badly. So it's going to be a good goal for us to set and to work on, to challenge ourselves to get young families into this church.
Yeah. It will definitely be a lot of work, and that's why we're talking about it. We've been talking about the necessity of being posterity focused, the necessity of being focused on those younger generations. One of the things, and this is actually going to be the topic of our sermon next week. We talked about the necessity of doing it. Next week we're going to talk about how we do it. But just a little tidbit is this. In order to get young families in the church, you need to have things that young families want. And what are those? They want their children to be cared for. They want their children to be involved. They want their youth age kids to be mentored and fed and just loved. And so, in my mind, that's half the battle. We need to cultivate a culture of be known for our church loving on children, our church loving to minister to children, and when young families see that that's the case, I would imagine prayerfully that they're going to respond, and so that's certainly going to be a focus of our church as we move forward. So whoever sent that in, I appreciate that. We're going to expound on that a little more fully next week, and so hope you get your answer question fully then. So, would you add anything to that, Bill?
No, that's a great challenge for us, is to come together and find something that's going to excite these young people to come into our church, and we're going to have to welcome them.
Yeah. So we've been discussing the posterity, the third word in our focus statement. We've got testimony, community, posterity. Those are the things that we as a church feel that ought to be our focus. And last week we began to talk about posterity, and more specifically the necessity, the absolute necessity for us as a church body to focus on those future generations, those younger generations. So my question for you is this. Do you feel it's necessary for a church to focus on the future?
Well, absolutely. We'd be dead if we didn't.
Yeah.
I was excited yesterday, as I was telling you earlier, about you going back into history.
Mm.
And I guess it shows my age because most of that I went through. When I was 9 and this church just started being built,
Mm-hmm.
I was the youngest member of the church. And it so excited me that I was given a shovel to come out and to break ground for the new
Wow.
church,
Wow.
along with the oldest member and the chairman of the deacons and the chairman of the trustees. And I've always remembered that.
Yeah.
And then you brought out building the church in Monarch.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can remember going with my dad and a large group of men went out to Monarch and here in Northside too, and building the church. And then after that, we'd work all day. Of course, I was a great help, you know. But after we'd work all day, the women would come in and bring food, and we just had a wonderful time,
Yeah.
and serving the Lord.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned Paul Davis
Mm-hmm.
and Shirley. My, what an asset they were to our church. He was a captain in the army,
Mm-hmm.
and he went over to Germany and started this mission. And just a few years ago, I heard that church was running over 500 now.
Wow.
And Paul sent to our church a young German man, Hans Jürgens Karl, who escaped from the Iron Curtain. And he came to Northside, and we sponsored him. He lived with my mom and dad, my brother and sister, for a little over a year.
Oh, wow.
And all of this was due to mission work.
Absolutely.
And so it was great.
Yeah.
So it's good to look back on history,
Mm-hmm.
but we've got to look to the future.
Absolutely.
And our goal, I mean, we're not there yet. We've got many things ahead of us
Yeah.
that we need to continue to do, so that our young people one day can sit back like I am and say, well, you know, I was a part of this,
Yeah.
and we're growing and growing, and that's what our goal should be.
I loved looking through that little pamphlet. It was the 126th anniversary of our church, and there's a page that's just full of dates and different events that went on in it. And in the early stages, there were a lot of just great things. Yesterday, I think it was 26 people saved at a revival.
Correct.
I had another revival. 120 something people were added to the church just as a result of that revival. And there were other in the church in Germany, just great things. But I noticed, and this is kind of something that breaks my heart a little bit, and as we got closer and closer to the 2000s,
Mm-hmm.
closer and closer to present day,
Correct.
those things started to disappear. And there were some great things that we did in the past, and then there were some you know, it seemed like we were filling space with some of the stuff that's getting closer to where we are. I want us to get back to doing some fantastic things in the name of the Lord. And I believe that starts with exactly what you're talking about, that focus on the future. I think you left before business meeting started yesterday.
No.
Oh, you okay?
Business.
So what John Branham said when he stood up, I thought that was absolutely wonderful. And what he said in a nutshell was this: there's a reason a car windshield is this big and the rear view mirror is this big, because we're supposed to focus on what's in front of us. And I love that. John, if you're watching, thank you so much for that statement. It spoke to me, and I hope it spoke to all of us. We ought to be focusing on the future, because even if you have some laurels you can rest on, and this church does, we just know several of them, it's not a good idea for us to do so. We can't do so if we're trying to move forward as we know that we're called to do. So do you see that as a danger? Do you see living in the past as a danger?
No, I think it's encouraging when we look in the past and see what we've done, but then we want to remember that, but we need to look to the future. What more can we do to advance the future and get things going? And it's tougher today than it was back in those days. We didn't have computers and cell phones, and we would get together as a community all the time. when we were having those great revivals, a lot of times the three main Baptist churches would get together
Yeah.
and have these revivals. I mean, I was saved in a revival, and it was wonderful. And we would have 2 week revivals, and we would get together. Today we can't even get a 3-day revival started.
It's tough.
But we can get back to that if we set our mind to it.
Absolutely. I think you're right. There's nothing wrong at all with being rooted in the past, because I mean everybody ought to have unless you're a brand new church, you've got your roots in the past. There's nothing wrong with reflecting on the things that God has done. I think it glorifies the Lord
It does.
when we look at those things and glory in them. But we can't live there.
No.
We can't live there. It would be dangerous for us to say, look at all the things we've done and that's it.
And quit.
Like we talked about yesterday, the guy who's living in his glory days. We've got to have our focus on the future in order for us to realize a successful future for this church. So yeah, I appreciate all of those statements. Next question we got, and if you guys, again, if you're just joining us and you have a question for us, be sure to get those posted. We would love to hear from you. How valuable do you feel a healthy children's and youth ministry is?
Well, we've got to have it.
Yeah.
You know, that's our future. So we've got to have a healthy environment for our children and train them properly in the scriptures, because that's going to be our church of tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So that is very important to me. That's very important.
Yeah. Not only do I agree with that, that it's the church of tomorrow, I think it's vital to have it right now to benefit our church today. We talked a little bit about the fact that those ministries are attractive.